Hey, welcome back. Um, Hope all is well with you all. Hopefully, you are still um, working hard on all the things that are asked of you in the previous videos, your quizzes, your workbooks, things like that. Please continue to send them in to me. I've marked whatever I have. And yeah, so just keep working hard. Um, and now that we're on this booklet, for those of you that don't have a paper copy, and for those of you that do, I would have started doing my definitions and the fill in the or combine the sentences and questions and stuff like that on a Google Doc, and then just share it with me when we finish this unit, and then we'll worry about that stuff later. So we're going to start student activity 18, national interests in times of crisis. So this is page 12 of the workbooklet. We're going to focus, and you should focus your summary on answering this question. How do nations respond in times of crisis? So yesterday we kind of introduced the climate that Europe found itself in. So we're going to see what happens when everyone's made friends and starting to arm themselves, and that one little spark that ignites the world to war. So, if you're following along, slide 47 has a map that shows you Europe. So, the Triple Alliance, or the Central Powers. This is one of the alliance systems we talked about yesterday. Sorry, before we go on, just terms that we're going to introduce today is the Black Hand and the Schlieffen Plan. I was going to find a video and show you in the description yesterday about the Black Hand, but then I would have spoiled all my information for today. So I will I'll find a nice video for you to watch about the Black Hand for today's video. So back to our map. We have the German Empire. We have the Austro-Hungarian Empire. We have the Kingdom of Italy. It says before 1915 because we're going to see that the Italians are going to switch sides a year in. But we'll get to that. We have the Ottoman Empire, which on this map here is labeled as Turkey. And then we have Bulgaria, and Bulgaria after 1915, because Bulgaria will actually join the Central Powers. On the other side, we have the Triple Entente. So these are the countries in the blue. So we have the French Republic, we have the Russian Empire, which only lasts until 1917 because of events that we will address. The Russian Revolution starts in 1917. The British Empire. So that does include colonies as well. So Canada will also play its role in the First World War as well. The United States is going to enter to the war in 1917, so they'll get about a year of action in. They are also brought into war because of two key events, but we'll get to those. So stay tuned. The Japanese Empire, the Kingdom of Italy after 1915, and then Belgium, Serbia, Romania, and Portugal. So some of the other countries that are on here that we didn't mention, so things like Switzerland, Spain, the Netherlands, Norway, and Denmark, and Sweden, they are neutral. They don't choose a side. So that is essentially the lineups for both sides. So if we can put a versus in the middle, that's essentially how it would look like, except for Italy jumping over. But again, we'll get to that. So if you're following along, slide 49 has a introduction to the Great War. It's part 1. It's about 5 minutes long. I'd give it a watch. It may help to fill in some context and background. So, national interest in time of crisis. Every European country was expecting a war. Things were just too tense. Like we talked about yesterday, all the military alliances, the imperialism, and everything. It was all starting to boil, and this image here shows its focus point as being the Balkans. So many events could have led to the spark of war. So the Balkan Wars, the Moroccan Crisis, the Daily Telegram affair. But the spark is the Balkans. So if you look here, there are three nations, three countries that are all focusing their attention on this point: Austria-Hungary, Russia, and the Ottoman Empire. In the background, Austria-Hungary has an alliance with Italy, an alliance with Germany, and so they have backing there. The Ottoman Empire has aid coming from Germany. We look on the other side. Russia has a treaty with Britain, a treaty with France, and an alliance between the both. So we have, again, the national interest of each of these three in the inner circle all relate to the Balkans. Austria wants it for imperial control and expansion. Russia wants influence because of things like ethnic ties. They're all Slavic peoples. Religious ties, they're all Eastern Orthodox. So they feel that connection. The Ottoman Empire claims land to be theirs as it had been previously, prior to the Balkan Wars. So they see the Balkans as being their own territory that has been in revolt against them, against their sultan. Anyways, so in modern day Bosnia, which has been taken over by the Austrians, the Black Hand is formed, and this is one of the leading events to war. So the Black Hand was a nationalistic Serbian group, and it was supported by the Serbian government and the military. So it's based in Bosnia, but it is being supplied and supported by the Serbian government and military. So the young fella here with the interesting mustache is a young Serbian nationalist named Gavrilo Princip. He joins this group because he feels that the same way that a lot of Germans and Italians felt that all people of the same ethnicity should be brought together in one cultural center in one country. So he joins it. He and his friends plan an attack on the Austrian Empire. They are aware that it is a massive country with a well-equipped army, so they don't really stand a chance in terms of fighting a direct fight, but they're going to attack it in its lineage, its dynasty, and they're going to focus their attention on the heir to the throne, because at this time, Emperor Franz Joseph, we saw his picture yesterday, he is very old. He's aged. He's aging, and they have a heir to the throne, who they want to, who the Black Hand wants to get rid of. This is Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and he is next in line. He is the son of the Emperor Franz Joseph. So on Sunday, June the 28th, 1914, the Archduke and his wife Sophie were visiting Sarajevo. Sarajevo is the capital of Bosnia. They are in there, they are going around town, they are seeing how this new acquisition, they're just going around, they're meeting people, and this is the plot. The plot is to kill him while they are there. So on slide 52, here is a History Channel video of the events of that morning. So the plan was that Princip and his friends would throw a bomb under the car of the Archduke, but as chance or luck would have it, they missed. So Princip went to a small cafe to plan his next move. Him and his friends are distraught. They've missed their chance. However, the Archduke's driver made a wrong turn, and they are passing by this cafe. So by happen chance, he looks up and there's his target driving down, um, and they can't believe their luck. So not to leave it to chance, Princip draws a revolver, a pistol, and runs up, jumps onto the car, and fires shots at the Archduke and his wife. And unfortunately, both are killed. They are both assassinated. Um, they apprehend Gavrilo Princip and his associates before they are able to commit suicide. So each of them had on their person a pill which contained what did it? Shoot, I forgot what the name. It was a poison. Um, I'll continue and it'll come to my mind. So they had a plan to bite into this pill and release the poison. It would have killed them instantly. However, they are unable to do so, and they are captured. Um, News reaches the Austrian Emperor Franz Joseph that that his son, the Archduke, has been assassinated. He is shocked. He is heartbroken. He is saddened. He is angry because they realize that this group has a connection to Serbia. So, on the 23rd, an ultimatum is sent to Serbia. Essentially, allow Austria to enter, Austrian authorities to find this terrorist organization, find its links, and apprehend those who are guilty. Cyanide. That is the poison that they planned on taking. Sorry. Fast forward though. They send that list of demands to Serbia. Serbia clearly doesn't want to have anything to do with these sort of demands because it infringes on their self-determination, and they're just not having it. However, they have support. Russia backs Serbia in the event of war, essentially saying, do not worry, Serbia, if Austria tries something, we have your back. To which Austria's ally, Germany, gives Austria its full support. What has been coined nowadays as the blank check. Essentially, Germany is saying, we will support you however you want with whatever is necessary in case this war escalates, in case the Russians do actually come in. So, because Serbia is not willing to allow Austrian officials to enter its country to search out for the Black Hand and its links to the military and to the government, Austria declares war on Serbia July the 28th. Russia then begins to mobilize against Austria and Germany because there is an alliance. So they just openly declare war on both of them. Germany then begins to mobilize, and it has to mobilize against Russia, and then ultimately also against Russia's ally, against France. And they plan an attack on France for August the 1st, the famous Schlieffen Plan. So what their plan is to enter through Belgium and then cut through northern France and sweep around in an arched formation and then capture Paris to knock France out of the war before Russia is able to mobilize. The Germans figure that Russians are they're not as industrialized, so things like railway lines are not as well equipped. So they are trying to take care of France first, because as we remembered yesterday, France and Russia are allies now. Germany is in the middle. It doesn't want to be fighting a war on both sides. So it thinks, I will first attack France, knock them out with our Schlieffen Plan, and then worry about Russia when they get their act together. But because they've entered Belgium, Belgium had an alliance and an agreement with Britain, and it said if anyone was to declare war or attack Belgium, that Britain would get involved. So the British demand Germany to leave Belgium. The Germans aren't really hearing it. They're not really caring. So the British declare war on August the 4th. So 5 of the 6 great European powers are now at war. Because of alliances, we're going to see other peoples come in. So because of the empires, Canada is now officially in the war because of the British. The Italians are going to join the war, and all of these things. So if you're following along, slide 55 kind of has a really good drawing of this. So you have here represented different peoples. It was a very slippery slope, but the war will now happen. It will begin because of the alliance system. So, following along on slide 56, this is the German military plans. This is their plans for Western Europe. This is the Schlieffen Plan. So the red arrows are to be the Germans. And what they were planning was, again, to go through Belgium, to wrap around, and to come down and circle Paris to knock out the French. The Germans had been planning this for a while because the Germans had created what was known as the General Staff. The General Staff is essentially what every country now has. It's a military intelligence that plans for future wars. So their plan was to knock out France so that they can deal with Russia. However, they didn't extend far enough. So they marched through Belgium, which is a neutral country. So they've broken the treaty, and this plan should have taken about 39 days, and it would have forced the surrender of the French people, and then they could spend the rest of the war fighting in Russia. On the same side, France has a plan. They have Plan 27, I believe, if my Roman numeral reading is correct. They were going to invade along the border into Alsace-Lorraine, which, if you remember, was taken as a part of the Franco-Prussian War in 1870. And then they were to strike at Germany's industrial heartland, the Rhine Valley. So if my hand here is Alsace-Lorraine, right here would be the Rhine Valley, where a lot of German industry is. So they were going to attack German industry to halt their advance and stop them from being able to produce things. So it relied on this fighting spirit of the French soldiers to push through this region and to knock out Germany from being able to truly get itself going into the war. The British, they decided to use to their strength. So a naval blockade was established. And it was going to blockade the Central Powers from having access to their colonies, so the Germans. They also sent an expeditionary force to assist the French, and they were essentially pulling a lot of their resources from the colonies. So Canadian soldiers were shipped overseas. Indian soldiers, New Zealanders, Australians. These are all going to play their role, but also supplies. So food supplies, weaponry, all these things. Britain is well equipped in terms of its empire to maintain and sustain a long war. So Russia also had a plan as well. So when we look at the question of how do nations respond in time of crisis, well, it's kind of obvious that each one of them had their own plan on what they were going to do. We've talked about the German Schlieffen Plan, the French plan, the British plan. This is the Russian plan. So we're talking about Plan 29. Again, if my Roman numeral reading is correct. So this is an extensive building program allowed Russia to mobilize far quicker than the Germans thought possible. So they had actually gotten their act together, and were going to attack eastern Germany and Austria-Hungary. And they had no plan to mobilize against just one. It was a full-on attack because the border between Russia and Austria-Hungary is massive. So their plan was to an all-out assault. Population-wise, it was possible. And when we talk about the border between Austria, Hungary, and Russia, it's into what modern-day Ukraine is now. That is very open territory. We're talking plains, not a whole lot of mountainous terrain. So it's wide open for armies to be running back and forth over. So these are the plans, and this is how these countries how these nations responded to the time of crisis. They were well prepared for war. Like I said, it was expected to happen. There was too much building up that this was not going to happen. This is like when you shake a bottle of soda or champagne and the cork is just hanging on. It's going to pop. So we do have to talk about the public reaction to the war as well. Overwhelmingly, the public supported the outbreak of the war, and they were kind of relieved that it finally started. There was this question of when it was going to happen, because, like I said, all this build-up and stuff. So the war was understood that it was going to be quick. Like, it was going to be over by Christmas. So we're talking, the outbreak is July. They're talking August, September, October, November, December. They're thinking like a 5-6 month war, and it's going to be over. And then they all believed that they were going to be victorious. Every nation believed that their side was going to win. They had either the equipment, the knowledge, the resources, the empire, whatever. Every country knew that it had a feeling it was going to win. And this other part here, the sense of adventure. So the young men flocked to join the army to prove themselves. So this idea of this macho-ness that existed, this was like a test. Do we have the stuff to win? Am I a coward or am I a hero? Am I going to go to war? So they really romanticized the war for these people. However, as we're going to see in tomorrow's lecture and so on, that the romantic view of the soldier coming back a war hero is going to be supremely and utterly changed when we introduce things like amputation and shell shock or PTSD. It's going to break a lot of people, unfortunately. So when we talk about people joining the army, Britain, which did not have conscription, called for 500,000 soldiers, 750,000. So 250,000 more signed up. So that includes from the colonies as well. So Canadian soldiers do end up joining and going to fight. So on slide 61, again, here's part 2 of the Great War. It adds some more context, and I will provide some videos that I feel will help to get things going. Again, more context for you. So on slide 62, we have a map, and this map here will show you the breakup of what happens, the breakdown of what happens, because the Schlieffen Plan, it's not a success. It's actually a failure, and we will probably talk about this again tomorrow. But what the Germans actually do is they come into not far enough. So the last army that was supposed to go behind Paris actually dropped ahead of it, which gave the French enough time. Instead of going for Alsace-Lorraine, they turned around and they went up. And then what we're going to see along the western front is this here too. So that dotted line, that brown dotted line, that is essentially going to be a trench line. So we will talk about trench warfare when we talk about the Great War, probably tomorrow. And this line is going to go from the English Channel all the way down to Switzerland, and it's going to essentially create the battle lines for the First World War. On slides 63 and 64, we see Mr. Hendrickson on his trip, I assume, to the Western Front. So we will, again, tomorrow we will introduce a lot of the fighting of what happens. So that is it for the lecture. If we're on the summary of now, how do nations respond in times of crisis? Well, a lot of them responded with the sense that they wanted war. All sides were prepared for war in terms of their technology, but also in terms of their abilities and their what's the best way? They all had alliances, so they're all okay with they feel they have support. So in the first two slides, we looked at the support systems that each of them had. We talked about the boiling point being in the Balkans. Each one had their own interests. How they responded to crisis? Well, they all had a plan in place for when the inevitable happened. So when the Archduke was assassinated in Sarajevo, each had their own plan. The Germans were going to knock out the French. The French were going to take back Alsace-Lorraine and attack the Rhine Valley. The British were going to blockade the seas. The Russians were going to attack Austria and Hungary together. So you see, each responded with their own war plans. There was no talk of peace, if you noticed. No side had prepared for dialogue. It was going to be war, and even the public were prepared and even a little excited for it. 500,000 was asked by the British to join the army. 750,000 joined. So we're talking 250,000 more people said, we are ready to fight. So it shows you that Europe was kind of ready for this. But we're going to see tomorrow that they weren't ready for this type of war. I'm going to introduce a phrase to you called total war. This war, World War I or the Great War, it wasn't like any other war that any European had ever fought before. And it's going to change the way that war is fought even up until now. So, again, if you have any questions or concerns about what was talked today, leave a comment or email me. And I will get back to you as soon as I can. Continue working on your quizzes and your previous booklets. Send them to me, and I will mark them as soon as I can. If you have any questions or concerns about anything outside of lecture, marks or whatever, email me, and I will give you a more detailed response. Stay safe, and I will see you tomorrow.